When he aged out of the system, he inherited a family ranch he never knew existed. But what he found in the barn wasn't just old machinery. It was a choice that would define the rest of his life. If you've ever felt lost and searched for a place to belong, a place that was truly yours, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here for people who understand what it means to fight for a home. We read every comment, and your story matters to us. The sound I remember most from that day is the click of the gate. Not a loud, dramatic slam like in the movies, but a quiet, metallic snap. A sound of finality. It was the sound of a lock engaging behind me for the last time, separating the world I knew from the one I was about to enter. For 18 years, my life had been a series of gates, of locked doors and numbered rooms and schedules taped to the wall. The Northgate Youth Authority Center wasn't a home. It was a holding pattern. And on my 18th birthday, the pattern was broken. I was out, free, and completely, terrifyingly alone. I stood on the cracked sidewalk, holding a single, slightly damp cardboard box that contained everything I owned. 3 changes of clothes, a worn copy of a book someone had left behind, a toothbrush, and a small stack of official papers that declared me Leo Vance, adult citizen, no longer a ward of the state. The morning was gray and cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps right into your bones. It matched the feeling inside me perfectly, a hollow, gray numbness. I had expected to feel something. Joy, maybe. Fear, definitely. But there was just nothing. An empty space where a future was supposed to be. Ms. Albright, my caseworker for the final 2 years, stood beside me for a moment, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and professional distance. She was a good person, I think, but she was tired. You could see it in the lines around her eyes. She'd seen hundreds of kids just like me stand on this exact spot, holding a similar box, facing the same indifferent sky. "You have the bus pass," she said. It wasn't a question. "And the address for the shelter. They're expecting you. You check in by 6-inch. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The shelter. Another institution, just with a different name. A place to sleep until you figured out how not to be homeless. That was the grand prize for graduating from the system. "And this?" she said, pulling a thick, cream-colored envelope from her briefcase. It looked strangely elegant and out of place in her government issue bag. "This came for you yesterday. From a law firm." I stared at it. My name was typed on the front in a crisp, old-fashioned font. Leo Vance. Below it, the address of the center. A law firm? For me, I finally managed to say. The words felt rough in my throat. "That's what it says," she confirmed. "I was supposed to give it to you upon your official release." "That's now," she handed it to me. The paper was heavy, expensive. It felt important, which was a sensation so foreign to me it was almost comical. Nothing in my life had ever been important. "Probably a mistake," I mumbled, tucking it into the pocket of my thin jacket. A bill for my own existence, maybe. A final invoice from the state for services rendered. Ms. Albright gave a small, sad smile. "Maybe, or maybe not. Good luck, Leo," she patted my shoulder. A quick, awkward gesture, and then turned and walked back toward the gate. The lock clicked again as she let herself in, and then she was gone. I was left alone on the sidewalk, the city's morning traffic starting to hum around me. The box in my hands felt heavier now. I walked to the bus stop, my movements stiff and automatic. Find the shelter, check in, survive. That was the plan. It was the only plan I had. I sat on the cold plastic bench and pulled out the envelope. My fingers fumbled with the seal. Felt like I was breaking into someone else's life. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. The letterhead read, Abernathy and Sons, Legal Counsel. The text was brief and formal. It requested my presence at their office at my earliest convenience to discuss the last will and testament of Mr. Arthur Vance. My grandfather. The name hit me like a physical blow. Arthur Vance. I knew the name, but only as a ghost. A whisper from a life I couldn't remember. My mother, according to the thin file the state kept on me, had died when I was 2. My father was a blank space, and my grandfather, He was just a name on a form, listed as next of kin, but with a note beside it, contact declined. He had declined contact. He hadn't wanted me. That was the story I had carried with me for 16 years. It was the bedrock of my identity, the unwanted kid. And now his lawyers were contacting me? It had to be a mistake. A different Leo Vance. Or more likely a debt. He'd probably died owing money, and some ancient law meant they were coming after his only living relative. Me, the boy with a cardboard box and a bus pass to a homeless shelter. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. I spent that first night at the shelter, the sounds of coughing and quiet weeping a familiar lullaby. I lay on the thin mattress, the lawyer's letter clutched in my hand under the scratchy blanket. I didn't sleep. The next morning, instead of looking for a day labor job, I used my bus pass to go to the address on the letterhead. It was downtown, in one of those old, imposing buildings with marble floors and brass elevators. I felt a fresh wave of certainty that I was in the wrong place. My worn jeans and threadbare jacket were an insult to the polished silence of the lobby. The offices of Abernathy and Sons were on the 7th floor. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and money. A receptionist with impossibly perfect hair looked up from her computer, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second as she took in my appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth and cool. "I'm here to see Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice cracking slightly.
"I'm Leo Vance."
Her expression shifted to one of professional curiosity. "Ah yes, Mr. Vance. We've been expecting you. Please have a seat. I'll let him know you're here." I sat on the edge of a leather chair that was probably worth more than my entire life's possessions. A few minutes later, a man who looked to be in his late 60s emerged from a heavy wooden door. He was tall and stooped, with kind, tired eyes that seemed to see more than he let on. He wore a rumpled tweed suit. This was Mr. Abernathy. "Mr. Vance," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm. "Thank you for coming. Please, come in." His office was lined with books from floor to ceiling. A large window looked out over the bustling city below, a world away from the sidewalk where I'd stood just 24 hours earlier. He gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs opposite his massive oak desk, which was cluttered with neat stacks of files. "I'll be direct, son," he began, sitting down with a soft groan. "I was your grandfather's lawyer for over 40 years, and his friend. He passed away 2 weeks ago." I just nodded. I didn't know what to say. How do you mourn a man you never knew? A man you believed had rejected you? "Arthur was a complicated man," Mr. Abernathy continued, steepling his fingers. "Stubborn, proud, but he loved his family fiercely. He loved your mother. And he loved you." That was the line that broke the dam of my numbness. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path through the grime on my cheek. "He declined contact," I said, the words coming out as a choked whisper. "The state file said so." Mr. Abernathy sighed. A deep, weary sound. "The state file says many things. Not all of them are the complete truth. We can talk about that later if you wish. For now, we need to discuss his will. Arthur didn't have much in the way of cash. In fact, he died with significant debt. But he had land. His ranch, Starlight Creek. It's about 160 acres, nestled up in the foothills. Been in your family for 3 generations," he paused, letting the words sink in. "And he left it all to you, Leo. The land, the house, the barn, everything. It's yours." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the information. A ranch. A home.
Mine.
It felt like a dream. A cruel joke. "But you said there's debt." "Yes," he confirmed, his expression turning grim. "A substantial mortgage, and the property taxes are 2 years in arrears. The bank has already started foreclosure proceedings. You have about 90 days to either pay off the back taxes or work out a new payment plan for the mortgage. Otherwise, they'll seize it." The flicker of hope in my chest died just as quickly as it had appeared. Of course, there was always a catch. "I don't have any money," I said flatly. "I have a cardboard box and $17. "I know," Mr. Abernathy said gently. Arthur knew that would be the case, which is why he instructed me to inform you of the other option. He slid a glossy brochure across the desk toward me. The logo on the front was for a company called Mountain Ridge Developments. They've been trying to buy your grandfather's land for years, he explained. It's the last private holding adjacent to a large parcel they own, where they plan to build a luxury resort and golf course. They need his land for water rights and access. They made him a final offer a month before he passed. That offer is still on the table, and it is extended to you as the new owner. He turned the brochure over. On the back, a figure was written in neat ink. It was a number with so many zeros I had to count them twice. It was more money than I could possibly imagine. Enough to live on for years. Enough to buy a small apartment, go to school, build a life. A real life, not one cobbled together from shelters and day labor. It's a very generous offer, Mr. Abernathy said, his tone carefully neutral. It would pay off all the debts and leave you with a considerable sum. All you would have to do is sign. He slid a document next to the brochure. A sales agreement. My head was spinning. 2 days ago, my future was a homeless shelter. Now I was being offered a fortune. It was the easy way out, the smart way out. Take the money and run. Forget the ranch I'd never seen, the grandfather I'd never known. Sign the paper and be free of it all. Any sane person would do it. But then I remembered the feel of the heavy envelope in my hands. The name Arthur Vance. The single tear that had surprised me. There was a story here I didn't know. A piece of myself that was tied to a place called Starlight Creek. Can I see it first? I asked, my voice barely audible. The ranch. Before I decide. Mr. Abernathy looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw a genuine smile touch his lips. It was small, but it was there. I was hoping you'd say that, he said. Your grandfather would have too. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a bus ticket and a small, tarnished brass key. The bus leaves tomorrow morning. It will take you to the town of Harmony. From there, it's a 5-mile walk. This key is for the front door. He pushed them across the desk. Go see your home, Leo. Then you can decide what to do with it. The bus ride was long, rattling through the sprawling suburbs and then out into the open country. The concrete and steel of the city slowly gave way to rolling hills, patches of forest, and wide open fields. With every mile, the air coming through the cracked window of the bus seemed to smell cleaner, fresher. I watched the landscape change, feeling like I was traveling not just through space, but through time, back to a past I had never experienced. I clutched the old brass key in my pocket, its edges worn smooth. It was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become fluid and uncertain. The town of Harmony was little more than a wide spot in the road. A general store, a gas station, a diner with a faded sign, and a handful of houses. The bus driver grunted, "End of the line, kid," and I stepped out onto the dusty shoulder of the road. The silence was overwhelming after the constant noise of the city. It was a living silence, filled with the rustle of wind in the tall grass and the distant cry of a hawk. I got directions from a man at the general store, a weathered old fellow with kind eyes who looked me up and down with open curiosity. Starlight Creek? Arthur's place, he'd said, his voice a low rumble. Haven't seen anyone heading up that way in a long time. You family? His grandson, I'd replied, and the word felt strange and new on my tongue. The man had just nodded slowly. Arthur was a good man, kept to himself, but he was solid. The mountain will be glad to have a Vance on it again. The 5-mile walk was more of a hike, up a winding dirt road that climbed steadily into the foothills. The air grew cooler, smelling of pine and damp earth. I was exhausted and hungry, but with every step, a strange sense of anticipation grew inside me. It wasn't just a piece of property I was walking toward. It was an answer, or at least the beginning of one. I rounded a final bend in the road, and there it was, Starlight Creek. The sight of it stole the breath from my lungs. It was nestled in a small valley, a wide meadow of tall, golden grass surrounded by a dark fortress of pine trees. A weathered two-story farmhouse with a sagging porch stood on a gentle rise, its windows like vacant eyes. To its left was a massive barn, its red paint faded to a soft, dusky rose by decades of sun and snow. The whole place looked wild, neglected, and achingly beautiful. It looked like it had been waiting. My feet carried me forward, through the tall grass, up the creaking steps of the porch. The brass key Mr. Abernathy had given me felt warm in my hand. It slid into the lock with a satisfying click. The heavy wooden door swung inward with a low groan, releasing a gust of stale, trapped air. The inside of the house was a time capsule. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and shafts of afternoon light cut through the grime on the windows, illuminating swirling motes. The furniture was simple, sturdy, and handmade. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, a stack of uncut logs resting beside it. Faded photographs lined the mantelpiece. I picked one up, wiping the dust away with my sleeve. It was a black and white photo of a young man and woman, standing in front of this very house. He was tall and lean, with a serious expression but a kindness in his eyes. She was beautiful, her smile radiant. They were holding hands. My grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor. I spent the rest of the day exploring the small house, room by room. It was like walking through the ruins of a life I should have been a part of. In the kitchen, a single mug sat on the draining board, as if waiting for a morning coffee that would never come. Upstairs, I found 2 bedrooms. One was clearly my grandfather's, the bed neatly made, a stack of books on the nightstand. The other was empty, except for a small wooden crib tucked into a corner, covered by a dusty sheet. My mother's room, I guessed. Maybe even mine for a brief time. The feeling of being a ghost in my own history was overwhelming. This place held the answers to every question I'd ever had. Who was I? Where did I come from? Why was I given away? But the house was silent, offering no secrets. As twilight began to settle over the valley, casting long shadows from the pines, a profound loneliness washed over me. The easy answer was still there, waiting for me back in the city. Sign the paper. Take the money. Leave this place and its silent, painful questions behind. I was about to give in to the despair, to walk back down the mountain and leave this all behind, when my eyes fell on the fireplace mantel again. Tucked behind the old photograph of my grandparents was another key. This one was smaller, more ornate, with a simple cardboard tag tied to it with a piece of twine. On the tag, in faded ink, were 2 words, "For the desk." My heart started to beat a little faster. I had noticed a heavy oak roll-top desk in a small study off the main living area. I tried the drawers, but the main lock was engaged. I rushed to the study, the small key clutched in my hand. It fit perfectly. With a soft click, the lock released. I rolled back the top of the desk. The surface was organized, a stark contrast to the dust-covered chaos of the rest of the house. A blotter, a pen set, and a single sealed envelope lying in the very center. It was the same heavy, cream-colored paper as the one from the lawyer's office. On the front, in the same familiar handwriting from the tag, was my name. Leo. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. This was it. A message from the man who had haunted my entire existence. I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and you have come home. I hope you have. I have prayed for it every day. I know you must have 1,000 questions, and I know you must hate me. The state records will tell you I abandoned you. It is a lie I have had to live with for 16 years. It was the only way I could think of to keep you safe. I had to stop reading, my vision blurring with tears. I sank into the dusty chair, the letter shaking in my hand. Keep me safe? From what? I forced myself to continue. Your mother, my sweet Sarah, made some terrible mistakes. She fell in with dangerous people, the kind who don't let go. They were connected to the men who want this land, the developers. They saw the value in this place long before anyone else did. They used your mother, got her to sign papers she didn't understand, promising her a share of the future profits. When she realized her mistake, she tried to back out. They wouldn't let her. They threatened her. And when you were born, they threatened you, too. The words on the page seemed to vibrate with a pain that was almost palpable. I tried to fight them legally, but they had money and power. They owned the local courts. They made it clear that if I didn't back off, you would pay the price. So I made the hardest choice of my life. I created a story. I told the authorities I was an unfit guardian. I cut ties with your mother, making them think she and you meant nothing to me. We arranged for her to leave town, to disappear, and for you to be placed in the system where you would be anonymous. A number on a file. Invisible. It was the only way I could ensure they wouldn't come looking for you. Wouldn't use you as leverage against me or this land. I let out a sob, a raw, ragged sound that echoed in the silent house. It wasn't abandonment. It was protection. A brutal, desperate act of love. My whole life, the story I had built myself around, was a lie. But it was a lie designed to save me. The letter continued. I have spent every year since then fighting them in my own way. They think I'm just a stubborn old fool who won't sell. But I've been watching, gathering proof of their corruption. The real inheritance I have to leave you, Leo, isn't this land. It's the truth. And the truth of what they've done is hidden. You will find it in the barn. Look for the stall with the North Star carved above the door. That was your mother's favorite horse. The rest is up to you. You can take their money. God knows you deserve some peace and an easy life. No one would blame you, or you can fight. You can finish what I started. Whatever you choose, know this. I have loved you every single day of your life. I am so sorry. Your grandfather, Arthur. I sat there in the dark, the letter lying on the desk, as the moon rose over the valley. The numbness I had felt for years was gone, replaced by a storm of emotions. Grief for the grandfather I never knew, rage at the faceless company that had stolen my family, and a deep, aching love for the man who had sacrificed everything for me. The choice he had laid before me was monumental. Walk away with a fortune and a clear conscience, or stay and fight for his legacy, for justice, for this piece of land that was soaked in the sorrow and love of my family. I stood there in that dusty, silent house, holding a letter from a dead man, with a choice that felt impossible. Sell and be safe, or stay and fight for something I didn't even understand. Have you ever been at a crossroads like that, where the easy path felt like a betrayal of who you wanted to be? Where every logical part of your brain is screaming at you to take the safe route, but something in your gut, something deeper, is telling you to stand your ground? Let me know in the comments. It really helps to know you're not the only one who has faced a choice that defines everything. Now, let's get back to that barn. The next morning, I woke up on the dusty floor of the study, the first rays of sunlight streaming through the window. My body ached, but my mind was clear. For the first time in my life, I had a purpose. I didn't know if I had the strength to see it through, but I knew I couldn't walk away. I couldn't let his sacrifice be for nothing. I made my way outside, the morning air crisp and cold. The barn loomed before me, larger and more intimidating in the daylight. Its huge double doors were held shut by a thick wooden beam. It took all my strength to lift it out of its brackets. With a groan of ancient hinges, the doors swung open, revealing the cavernous, shadowy interior. The air inside was thick with the smell of old hay, leather, and earth. It was a cathedral of wood and time. Light filtered in through cracks in the walls, creating dancing beams of dusty gold. On either side of a central aisle were rows of empty stalls, their doors hanging open. I walked slowly down the aisle, my footsteps echoing in the vast space. I ran my hand along the worn wood of the stalls, imagining the animals that had once lived here, the life that had filled this place. I searched for the carving his letter had mentioned. Stall by stall, I examined the wooden beams above each doorway. Finally, near the back of the barn, I found it. It was small and crudely carved, clearly the work of a child, but unmistakable. A 5-pointed star. The North Star, your mother's favorite horse. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. I stepped into the stall. The floor was covered in a thick layer of old, packed down straw. I knelt down and began to clear it away with my hands. Underneath were thick wooden floorboards. I ran my hands over them, searching for any sign of a loose board, a hidden seam. Nothing. They were solid, nailed down tight. I felt a surge of frustration. Had I misunderstood? Was this some kind of wild goose chase? I stood up and kicked at the floor in anger. One of the boards gave a hollow thud, a different sound from the others. I dropped to my knees again, examining it more closely. At one end, near the wall, I saw it. A tiny notch almost invisible in the dark wood. I dug my fingernails into it and pulled. The board resisted, then lifted with a soft scraping sound. Beneath it was a dark, rectangular hole, and nestled inside was a heavy, rust-covered metal box. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached in and lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked, and it was locked with a sturdy padlock. Of course it was. Nothing about this was going to be easy. I needed another key. I spent the next several hours turning the farmhouse upside down, searching for it. I looked in every drawer, every cupboard, under every piece of furniture. Nothing. I was beginning to despair when I found myself back in the study, staring at the small collection of books on my grandfather's desk. They were mostly old farming almanacs and repair manuals. But one book was different. It was a thin volume with a dark blue cover, its title embossed in faded gold, An Introduction to Celestial Navigation. I pulled it from the shelf. It felt different from the others, heavier. I opened it, and a small, flat key fell out from between the pages and clattered onto the desk. It was made of iron, and it was cold to the touch. The book was open to a chapter on identifying the North Star. Starlight Creek. My grandfather had been leading me on a trail of breadcrumbs, a map made of memories and meaning. I raced back to the barn, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the padlock. It turned with a rusty shriek. I lifted the heavy lid of the box. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold or jewels, but it was the most valuable inheritance imaginable. The first thing I saw was a thick stack of $100 bills, bound with a rubber band. I didn't count it, but it looked like a lot of money. Enough to pay the back taxes, at least. Beneath the cash were several more letters, tied together with a ribbon, and a thick, leather-bound ledger. I sat down on the dusty floor of the barn and opened the ledger first. The pages were filled with my grandfather's neat, precise handwriting. It was a meticulous record, spanning over 15 years. Dates, names, license plate numbers, financial transactions. It documented dozens of instances of illegal chemical dumping on the properties surrounding the ranch, all traced back to shell corporations owned by Mountain Ridge Developments. He had photographic evidence, soil sample results from a lab in the city, and notarized statements from 2 former employees who had been fired after they threatened to talk. He had been building a case piece by painstaking piece. This wasn't just about a greedy company. It was about criminal activity that had poisoned the land and threatened the health of the people in Harmony. Then, I untied the ribbon and began to read the letters. They were all addressed to me, written over the years on my birthday. Each one was a window into the heart of a man I'd never met. He wrote about the changing seasons on the ranch, about fixing a fence, about the memory of my mother learning to ride her horse in this very barn. He wrote about his loneliness, his guilt, and his unwavering hope that one day I would come home and read these words. The final letter was dated just a month before his death. "My dearest Leo," it read, "I am getting tired. The fight is long, and I fear I don't have much time left. The developers know I have this information. They've been trying to intimidate me. They sent a man to see me last week. He didn't make direct threats, but the meaning was clear. They are getting desperate. This ledger is my life's work. It is the only weapon I have to protect this land, to get justice for what they did to your mother and to this valley. The money in this box is everything I managed to save. Use it to pay the taxes. It will buy you time. The choice is now yours, and it's a heavier burden than any young man should have to bear. You can take this ledger to the authorities. It will start a war, Leo. A war they will fight with expensive lawyers and powerful friends. They will try to crush you. Or you can burn this box and everything in it. Take their blood money for the land, and go live your life in peace. You have been through enough. You owe this place and me nothing. The only thing I ask is that you choose. Don't let them take this choice from you, too. Whatever you decide, I am proud of the man I know you have become. Be safe. Be happy. All my love, grandfather. I sat there for what felt like hours, the ledger in my lap, the letters scattered around me. The dust motes danced in the sunbeams, silent witnesses. He had given me a choice, but it didn't feel like one. How could I burn this? How could I let them win after everything he had done? This was about more than a ranch now. It was about my mother. It was about the people of this valley. It was about a grandfather who had given up everything to see that I had a future. The weight of it all was crushing. I was 18 years old. I had no power, no money besides what was in this box. No one in my corner except for a lawyer I'd just met. The idea of taking on a massive corporation was insane. I was terrified, but for the first time in my life I wasn't numb. I felt a fire in my gut, a righteous anger that burned away the fear. He had spent 16 years fighting for me. The least I could do was fight for him. I carefully packed the ledger, the letters, and the money back into the metal box. I carried it back to the house and hid it under a loose floorboard in my grandfather's bedroom. I knew what I had to do. That evening, as I sat on the porch watching the stars begin to appear in the clear mountain sky, brighter and more numerous than I had ever seen in the city, I heard the sound of a vehicle coming up the long dirt road. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, and a sleek, black SUV pulled to a stop in front of the house. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was handsome, with a polished, easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Leo Vance?" he called out, his voice smooth as silk. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm with Mountain Ridge Developments. I hope I'm not intruding." He walked up to the porch, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. He looked around at the dilapidated farmhouse, the overgrown yard. "Quite the project you've inherited here," he said, his tone a mix of pity and condescension. "Your grandfather was a very determined man, but not always a practical 1-inch. What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady. "I just wanted to come and speak to you in person," he said, his smile widening. "We heard you came up to see the place. I wanted to reiterate our offer. In fact, seeing the state of the property, we're prepared to increase it." A gesture of goodwill, he named a new number, significantly higher than the first. "Enough to set you up for life, son. A fresh start. No debts, no worries. All you have to do is sign." He held out a pen and a new contract already filled out. It was the easy way out, presented on a silver platter. The devil on my shoulder. "My grandfather told me about you," I said, my voice low. Thorne's smile tightened just a fraction. He was a man of strong opinions, most of them unfounded. "He told me you poisoned this valley," I said, standing up. "He told me you threatened my mother. He told me you drove her away and forced him to give me up." The mask of civility dropped. Thorne's eyes turned cold as ice. "Your grandfather was a sad, confused old man who told himself fairy tales to cope with his own failures," he hissed. "You'd be wise not to make the same mistake. This is a business deal, kid. A very generous one. But the offer is only on the table for so long. Things can get complicated for a young man all alone out here. Accidents happen. Legal troubles appear out of nowhere. It would be a shame for you to get tangled up in old business you don't understand." The threat hung in the air between us, as clear as if he'd held a gun to my head. This was the moment. The choice. Fear coiled in my stomach, cold and sharp. But when I looked past him, at the dark silhouette of the barn against the star-filled sky, I saw my grandfather's face. I heard my mother's laughter, a sound I'd never known but could suddenly imagine. This wasn't just land. It was my heart. It was my home. I looked Marcus Thorne straight in the eye. "The property is not for sale," I said. "And I think you should leave now." His face twisted into a mask of fury. He snatched back the contract. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life, you little orphan," he spat. He stormed back to his SUV, slammed the door, and roared back down the road, leaving a cloud of dust and the stench of his cologne hanging in the night air. I stood on the porch, my body trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The war had begun, and I had just fired the first shot. The next morning, I walked the 5 miles back into Harmony. I used a $20 bill from the box, the first of my inheritance I'd spent, to buy a coffee and use the payphone at the diner. I called Mr. Abernathy. His voice was full of sleep when he answered. "Abernathy, it's Leo Vance," I said. "I'm sorry to call so early." "Leo, are you all right, son? Did you make it to the ranch?" "I'm here. I'm fine. But I'm not selling." I told him everything. About the letters, the ledger, the cash. About Marcus Thorne's visit and his veiled threats. I expected him to be skeptical, to tell me I was in over my head, to advise me to take the money and run. But he was silent for a long moment when I finished. All I could hear was the faint crackle of the line. "Arthur, you magnificent, stubborn old fool." He finally whispered, more to himself than to me. Then his voice became sharp, professional. "Leo, listen to me very carefully. Do not talk to anyone else about this. Do you understand? Stay at the ranch. Keep that box hidden. I'm going to make some calls. I have a friend at the Environmental Protection Agency and another who's an investigative reporter for the state paper. We need to handle this smartly. I'll drive up this afternoon. We'll go over everything together." "And Leo?" "Yes. You did the right thing," he said, and his voice was filled with a warmth that felt like a shield. "Your grandfather would be so damn proud of you." I hung up the phone, a wave of relief washing over me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had an ally. Walking back to the ranch, I felt a shift in the way I saw the world around me. The land didn't just feel beautiful anymore. It felt like it was mine to protect. The sagging farmhouse didn't look dilapidated. It looked defiant. It had weathered storms before, and it would weather this one, too. Mr. Abernathy arrived late that afternoon, his sensible sedan struggling up the final stretch of the dirt road. He brought with him 2 large bags of groceries and a thermos of hot coffee. We sat at the dusty kitchen table, and for the next 3 hours, I laid out the contents of the metal box. He read every letter, his expression growing more somber with each page. He examined the ledger, his legal mind immediately grasping the power of the evidence my grandfather had collected. "This is dynamite, Leo," he said, his voice a low, respectful murmur. "This is more than just a civil case for property fraud. With the dumping evidence and the witness statements, this is a criminal conspiracy. Thorne wasn't just threatening you. He was trying to cover up years of felonies." He explained the plan. He would take the ledger and copies of the photos to his contact at the EPA. The state would have to open an official investigation. He would also leak the story, along with excerpts from the witness statements, to his journalist friend. The public pressure would make it impossible for the company to bury it. "But you need to understand," he warned me, his kind eyes serious. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They will come after you. They'll try to discredit you, to paint you as a troubled, delinquent kid looking for a payday. They will use their army of lawyers to tie you up in court for years. It's going to be a long, ugly fight." "I know," I said. "I'm ready." He nodded, a look of profound respect on his face. "All right then, let's get to work." The first thing we did was take the cash from the box and drive into the county seat. We walked into the tax office and paid the 2 years of back taxes in full. The clerk, a stern-faced woman who looked like she'd seen it all, barely blinked as I counted out the stack of $100 bills. But getting that receipt, stamped paid in full, felt like winning the first major battle. Secured my ownership of the land. It bought us time. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet tension. Mr. Abernathy was true to his word. The EPA launched a formal investigation, and a series of articles began to appear in the state paper under the headline "The Poison Valley, the Stories Didn't Name Me," referring only to evidence provided by the estate of a local landowner. But Mountain Ridge Developments was named. Their stock price began to fall. Their carefully crafted image of being an environmentally friendly company was shattered. They fought back, just as Mr. Abernathy predicted. They issued public denials, calling the allegations baseless smears from a competitor. Their lawyers filed motions to dismiss the investigation. And the intimidation began again, this time more subtly. A car would sit at the bottom of my road for hours. I'd get hang-up calls on the old landline phone in the house, which I'd had reconnected. It was unnerving, but I wasn't the same scared kid who had left the Youth Authority Center. This land, this fight was changing me. I spent my days working on the ranch. I learned to use the old tools in the barn. I cleared the overgrown fields, mended fences, and patched the roof of the house. It was hard, physical work, the kind that left my body aching but my mind clear. I was pouring my sweat and my anger and my hope into this land, and it was slowly coming back to life. The people in Harmony, who had initially been wary of me, started to warm up. The old man from the general store, whose name was Cal, began leaving a bag of fresh vegetables on my porch once a week. A woman who ran the diner would wave me in for a free meal whenever I came to town for supplies. They had all known my grandfather. They had all suspected Mountain Ridge was dirty. They never said much, but their small acts of kindness were a quiet rebellion, a show of solidarity. I was no longer an outsider. I was Arthur's grandson. I was one of them. One evening, Cal stopped by in his rusty pickup truck. He sat with me on the porch, and we watched the sun set behind the mountains. "Your granddad loved this view," he said quietly. "He'd sit right here, every night. Said it was the only church he needed." He looked at me. "He'd be proud of you, you know, for staying, for fighting. This valley needed someone to stand up for it." His words meant more to me than any amount of money. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance anymore. I was fighting for a community. The legal battle raged on for months. It was a slow, grinding war of attrition. There were depositions, hearings, more threats from the company's lawyers. But with the evidence from the ledger and the new soil samples the EPA took, the case against them was undeniable. Major news outlets picked up the story. There was a public outcry. The tipping point came when the two former employees my grandfather had interviewed agreed to testify in front of a grand jury in exchange for immunity. Their testimony, confirming everything in the ledger, was the final nail in the coffin. The state attorney general filed criminal charges against Marcus Thorne and two other executives at Mountain Ridge Developments. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The company declared bankruptcy, and the resort was never built. The legal process meant that any financial compensation for the damage they'd done to the valley would be tied up in courts for years. I never saw a dime. Marcus Thorne and his colleagues got off with fines and probation, a slap on the wrist for men who had ruined lives and poisoned land. There wasn't a big, dramatic courtroom victory. Justice, I learned, is rarely so clean. But we had won. The land was safe. My grandfather's name was cleared. The truth was out. It's been a year now. The ranch is still a lot of work, and money is a constant worry. I took a part-time job at Cal's store to make ends meet. But every morning, I wake up in my own bed, in my own house. I drink my coffee on the porch and watch the sun rise over my valley. The land is healing, and so am I. The scars of my past, of the years in the system, are still there. They always will be. But they are no longer the whole story. They are just the foundation upon which I am building a new life. I learned that inheritance isn't about what you're given. It's not about money or property. The true inheritance my grandfather left me was a story of love, sacrifice, and resilience. He gave me a past I could be proud of and a future I could fight for. He taught me that home isn't just a place you live. It's a place you defend. It's a place you pour your heart into. It's the story you choose to live out. Home isn't a place you're given. It's a place you build, a place you protect, a place you earn. Sometimes the most valuable thing we inherit is a story that gives us the strength to fight for our own. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of a fight of your own for a place to belong, I hope you'll subscribe and become part of this community. Share your story in the comments below, because every single story of resilience and finding home deserves to be heard. You are not alone in this. We're in it together, building our own place, one story at a time.